Welcome to Magic Academy. Today we're going to be discussing the top 10 things you didn't know about staying in a domestic violence shelter. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Magic Academy here on YouTube. Please go ahead and subscribe if you're not already a member. Please like this video and share it on social media. Please give us a share on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere that you have your social presence. Let people know about us. The more people that come back here and subscribe, the more I can do for you here on YouTube. So let's get into this video. Okay, so we are going over the top 10 things you didn't know about staying in a domestic violence shelter. This is going to be a two-part video, you guys. I'm going to make them the first one as short as possible, and the second one I'm going to put as much info as possible in my personal experience and also make it as short as well. That's why I'm splitting up the video, so you guys can have the information on what it's like that you may not know, and then my personal experience that can kind of back that up a little bit for you. And so you can see, what it really is like. Maybe not in your state, but in my state and people that I've taught to in other states as well. It seems to be pretty common across the board, a lot of these things. Okay, so the top 10 things, and this is just basic functioning, what it's going to be like if you have to go to a domestic violence shelter. Also, just a statistic here, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men will have to go to a domestic violence shelter or will be experiencing domestic violence in their lifetime. Okay, that is a huge amount considering how many people we have in a city, in a state, in a county, in a state, in the United States, in a country, or even in the world. That's a lot of people that you may be seeing just at Walmart that may have to go to a domestic violence shelter, and these are the kind of things that you may not know they have to experience, and hopefully you won't have to. I'm going to let you know first off, before I get into the statistics, it is not a piece of cake, you guys. Going to a domestic violence shelter is very hard. You aren't treated like, it's not like you're winning an award. People aren't there to welcome you across the finish line and help you the way you think they are. They get paid to. They exist there to do that for you, but it is difficult. You are treated badly. It's demeaning. It's degrading, and you have to fight, for every bit of information you get. They don't just come out here and go, here's all the information. Here's the resources. Here's an attorney. Here's how to help you. It's not what you imagine. Okay, I mean, some TV shows in the past have made it look a lot like it's going to be the answer. It's not. So let's get into this. The top 10 things that you didn't know about staying in a domestic violence shelter. Number 1, the facilities or the rooms. I should say the lack of them. You are bunked up. It is like dorm living. Okay, it's a home usually. Sometimes it's a little small home. Here's the fact about it. It's some places are like a home. Some of them have multiple apartments on the residence as well as a shared dorm. So you may start in the shared dorm and then graduate to an apartment. Okay. However, even that apartment will probably have roommates. It's not private. Again, let me say, it's not private. It starts off intrusive, it stays intrusive, you do not have privacy at all, and that's just what your living situation is going to be like. You are piled in on each other sometimes when it gets very full. And then when it gets very empty, you feel very lonely because you're so used to being piled in with people. So first off, it's the facility, the rooms, and the lack of them. It can be, there's no privacy at all. And then number 2, your requirements for being there. You're required to go to classes. You are required to to attend activities, certain activities. You are required to do certain chores, okay? Whether it's cleaning, kitchen duty, you may be the cook for the day. You may be the person that's sweeping up all along the grounds. I mean, there is no limit to what kind of chores you can do there. If a function needs done in a domestic violence shelter, there's lots of people there, women or men, depending on if you're staying in a women's shelter or a men's shelter, and you will take your turn doing your chore. Classes can be not really appropriate for you. It depends on what classes and specialists they have that offer the class at the time, and you have to go. You don't want to go. You don't want to work through these issues, and they force you to go through them. Like, for instance, I had to go to a class for women that were incarcerated, and I had not been in jail at all. So what it was like reconnecting with your children coming out of jail, so I mean, I was able to relate to more seeing the women's history there, but I think at the same time they were kind of offended at me having to go to that class. Well, anyway, because I didn't want to get into mine right now. So you'll be required to go to classes. Some of them may not seem appropriate, but you will have to finish the ones you are assigned to. You will have to attend those. And activities. They do have activities as well. They aren't off campus. They're all on campus, but they're meant to, boost morale. You are required to go to them. And even if you don't trust leaving your stuff in your dorm, you're still required to leave it and go attend that activity. So also, some activities are for adults only, because it's for adult women working out issues and things. You'll have to leave your kids with babysitters if you're at a shelter that takes kids and families. You'll have to leave your kids with a group of women that will babysit. They are just other abused women watching your kids while you go to your activity, and then you take turns watching theirs. It's not the most confident feeling thing to have to go to this activity, leaving your kids with other women that are going through PTSD. It's ridiculous, but that's what they require in most shelters. Okay, so number 3, the social game. The social game, there again, is the women that you are residents with, the other residents, and it is sickening. These women are used to a lot of abuse. Some of them are coming out of narcissistic abuse beyond all gaslighting belief that you could have experienced. They become hard and they become experts, and they turn it on you. Your case managers don't notice it. Your case managers may see it as sincere, and it's just a social game they're playing so they can take your room, move you over here, get your benefit here, take your job for the week because they don't like theirs. It is worse than high school because these women have become professionals at being abusers, and they are turning it on you. And it's very hard to get your case managers to, because they can't be biased, but to see what's going on. So you got to be ready to defend yourself every step of the way in a nice fashion, because if you seem aggressive, then they don't want you there. So you've got to find a way to protect yourself in the social game. Okay, number 4, medications. A lot of times when we go to domestic violence shelters or anywhere, we have medications that we have to take with us, whether we're supposed to be taking, just a basic iron pill because we're low in iron. We have thyroid medication. Maybe you've got psych medication. Maybe you've got medication that regulates your diabetes. Whatever it is, here's the thing about your medication. You can't keep it on you. So when you go into a domestic violence shelter, here's the thing. It's like going into jail. You take off your shoes, you get searched, they take your purse, they empty it, they empty your luggage. It all gets stored somewhere for a few days. Your medications or anything that you need immediately gets sorted through, and they decide and put in a bag what you can take back with you, what you're going to be able to take to your little dorm room. And then the rest of it will get stored and sorted out to you for, as you need it or as they deem it's okay to release it to you. Your medications are put in a medicine cabinet with everybody else's medications, and a staff member will be in charge of dosing that medication to you. If that staff member is absent, if that staff member is late coming back from lunch, if that staff member gets off work at 5 and your medication is at 7 or 10 o'clock at night, you've got to make those arrangements early on or deal with the fact that you're not going to be having access to your medication. Here's another problem with your medications. Whatever it says, I thought I would have a bottle around here, whatever it says on your label, okay, take this medication 1 time a day, 4 times a day, whatever it says, but your doctor has told you, look, I'm giving you this because, you know, I want you to take it this way. It's going to say this because that's the standard way of taking it, but here's your directions of taking it. You need to get from your doctor in writing how that doctor wants you to take it that's different than what's on the label. And it needs to be dated as well from the date that he's giving that direction to you to when that ends. Otherwise, they will say, you know, okay, that was a week ago, get back, you have to do it the way the label says. And if you're not supposed to be taking a medication because you haven't built up a resistance to it, you're not supposed to be, you know, whatever, however the doctor has wanted you to start taking it, your condition doesn't require you to take it according to that, but the label's going to spit it out that way. You are still required to, the nurse will force you to take it that way. If you do not take it according to the labels, then the nurse can ask you to leave. She can put a grievance on you and ask you to leave the facility. So especially if it's psych meds or diabetes medication or anything that can cause you to be a harm to yourself or others if you don't take it right. So they absolutely insist that you take it according to the label. You need to get your doctor to write something that says, yeah, it's not, this is how you are supposed to take this medication, and put the medication name on that direction as well, or you'll be forced to take it. Again, your medication's locked away, you won't have access to it. Another thing about your medication is food access. So that's number 5 on the list, is food access in a domestic violence shelter. In most domestic violence shelters, you aren't allowed to have any kind of food in your dorm area or in your apartment. Well, once you get into an apartment, you may have a refrigerator, you may be allowed food, but sometimes even then not. If you're in a dorm, definitely you will not be allowed to have snacks, potato chips, nothing in your dorm room. Sodas, nothing. It's like riding a bus. You know, you can have water, covered water. You can't have snacks or foods in your dorm rooms. A lot of that is so that way, you know, nothing happens to your food and you don't blame them. So that somebody that may have a food allergy doesn't snack on your food, and, you know, whatever the reasons, that's what they do to you there. And your food access is limited to when the kitchen's open, like college. So the kitchen isn't always open, as you know, and it doesn't have late night hours. It'll be open for a breakfast time for about 1 to 2 hours. It'll be open for a snack. It'll be open, you know, in between breakfast and lunch. Then it'll be open for lunch for 1 to 2 hours. Then another afternoon snack time. If you're lucky, you'll have the snack times. If not, some domestic violence shelters don't have those. And then you'll have an evening hours where it's 1 to 2 hours. Now, I will say I have stayed in domestic violence shelters where we had breakfast and we had dinner. We had 0 lunch. You were expected to provide your lunch for yourself, and in some cases you're expected to provide your breakfast. They would serve dinner only. Okay? So, that being said, that kind of limited access on food, and that's because they don't have donations or finances or money for it. And if they leave the kitchen open, then some people, you know, binge eat when they're stressed, and you know, there's just no food for anybody. They have to guard their food, I guess. So it makes it really difficult if you're on a medication where you have to be eating, or you're diabetic and you need to be eating to regulate your body. You have thyroid, you have whatever you have, and you need to be eating throughout the day or having sugar. It's almost impossible to regulate your health at a domestic violence shelter on the hours of the kitchen. I'm not joking. And if you are taking your medication late at night and you need to take food with it, whether it's ibuprofen, you know, whatever it is, there is no food available for you. Sometimes they will have a donut or milk or something to go with late night medication. And they'll say, okay, it's time for, but it's in their timing and it's cut off at like by 11 p.m. I don't care what your needs are, that's the way it's going to be. And get used to this, you guys. Most of the food in a domestic violence shelter is donated. And a lot of it has expiration dates. Most of the milk that they pour you, when you see it being poured, is going to have an expiration date. But they'll tell you it was frozen. And it may taste funny, but if it's all you got, you're going to be eating it. You're going to be drinking that milk. Same with donuts. Donuts can, sometimes you're like, okay, that donut is way beyond expiration, but it's soggy or it's overly hard, and you're like, you're just trying to get through it because you're hungry, and it's forever before your cab or your bus or before you get to a bus or whatever till you get somewhere to get some food. You will find yourself enjoying that donut. Sadly. Thank goodness they have it, because you'd starve otherwise. But it's just not what you think it is. It's not like dorm food. Dorm food is amazing compared to the food that you get in a domestic violence shelter and the access to food. Okay, so number 6. Resources and access to people and resources while you're at a domestic violence shelter. Here's the thing. When you're at a domestic violence shelter, they have a huge staff. They have receptionists. They have, security. They have people that are your case managers. They have special case managers. They have attorneys that come in. They even have dentists that come in and do some dental work on the spot. Because at a domestic violence shelter, sometimes the woman is under such threat, a particular resident out of the whole staff, there will be like 1 or 2 sometimes, that is under such threat that she can't leave the facility for a while until after court cases happen, until things, weeks down the road. So during that time frame, a dentist may come in. The attorneys may come in, and everybody can benefit from that by appointment, first come, first serve, need sometimes, whatever it is, they determine it, or how many, a certain number of people that they're going to allow access for that day, because they can only be there for a day sometimes. So access to some of the benefits that they have there is not always for everybody. And even the resources that they do have from the case managers that are on staff all the time, they do not give you the information. I have sat there in front of a resource manager and been like, okay, I need to find this. How do I apply for welfare? How do I do this? What do I need? They're saying I need this. I don't have my ID right now. I had to leave that behind. How do I get my social security card or 2 forms of ID? I had to leave that behind. And they clam up. It's like they draw this blank and they don't know how to tell you to go get your ID sometimes. You have to go to their supervisor and say, they couldn't tell me this information. Can you tell me? And they'd be like, yeah, she should have known. And, whatever. Sometimes your resource manager will give you the runaround. I don't know why. Over simple information. It's difficult. So, resources and access to them gets very limited, and they will give a generic slip to everybody. And if you lose your slip, they'll tell you to copy it from somebody else. They act like they can't find it. They don't hand out resources all the time. And one of the reasons why is because resources close down, and they don't like giving out a list of resources for you to waste your time, for whatever reason. So if you get a list of resources and you're at a domestic violence shelter, don't lose that resource list, because it's really hard to get it again. And you'll find yourself with a phone book and a telephone, just trying to guess what topic should I look up so I can find a resource for myself. They expect, and they belittle you and demean you. I'm going to be honest with you. They expect you to already know what the resources are. My gosh, you're this age, we're so offended that you had a husband for so long and you had things provided for you, and now here you are at the domestic violence shelter, and we've been struggling all out. We know these resources. we've all been able to take care of ourselves. You should have been able to take care of yourself a long time ago instead of relying on whatever. You know the situation that you can get in with the prejudice of other women sometimes. So even your case managers can treat you that way. You've got to make sure and hold on to your resources and go to a supervisor if your case manager isn't giving them to you. And then ask around. Find out who is the best resource manager, who gives out the best information. Other clients that are there, other residents, will tell you eventually if they're nice enough. Okay, but don't talk about anybody because then they use that to stay longer. Everybody's in a threat of leaving. There's always somebody in a domestic violence shelter that they take calls daily. And there's always that call that comes in where that person needs to be there, and it could send you out the door because of room, because this person's in more of a crisis and now you're stable or more stable than that person was. So they'll constantly assess you once a week and see if, they have room for you, regardless of the time frame that you should be granted to stay there. They can cut it short anytime they would want to for availability. Okay, so I guess that would be number 7. Is that you're always in danger of leaving, depending on, you could get evicted anytime, basically. They could kick you out at any time based on intake and who's coming in that door. Number 8, the power over your phone calls, and your mail. Okay, this reminds me of something. Before we go on to that, let me back up. One of the things about being in a domestic violence shelter is privacy. And then we'll get into the phone calls and mail. Privacy. You are required not to tell anybody the address of where your domestic violence shelter is for safety of all the women, even yourself. I don't care if you feel safe telling the person you're in front of. You're not supposed to give out that address. You have to give out and use somebody else's address, for your business, because you can't give out that address. They do have a P.O. box, I think, sometimes. There may be certain situations, but typically you can't give it out because it's a private place for, when you're in danger. So we don't want any stalkers coming to the address. So that's part of it. And another part of it is when people go to drop you off, they can't come, like if you get a ride from your mom, because from the store, you were at her house that day, whatever the situation, they can only bring you 3 blocks, usually, like with a quarter mile to the domestic violence shelter. They can never drop you off at the door. That may even be your cab, like your Lyft rides and so on. They may have to, and you will have to walk the rest of the way. Sometimes those neighborhoods where a domestic violence shelter is located is not a safe neighborhood, even for walking a quarter of a mile. And depending on the time of day, especially in an unsafe neighborhood, it can be threatening. That alone can be a threat to you, just getting back to your domestic violence shelter. So, that's another thing that's really tough. They do sometimes have transportation for certain things, but typically no. I've only stayed in 1 or 2 that did, and the rest of them, not at all. You have to provide your own transportations, and like I said, it's chaos. It's chaos as far as getting a ride back, being able to get in. That whole thing it's up to them. So if they see you doing it wrong, if somebody brings you all the way to the gate and they weren't supposed to, you could be evicted immediately. Okay, so back to your phone calls, and mail. There is a receptionist, of course, and you have case managers and staff on duty at the domestic violence shelter, and security guards. Like I said, they'll go through your purse, they'll take things. Sometimes they'll take your cell phone. Sometimes they won't allow you to have cell phones. Typically, they usually do because it's for your safety. You may need to call out. If it's invaded, your cell phone may be the only thing that can save all of you. So typically they'll let you have your cell phones. They may not let you have them for the first 24 hours. or so until they know that you're not going to try to contact your abuser. Okay, and say, come pick me up, because it's a transition. Getting there is a big transition. You know, you're in this new place, you're with a whole bunch of crazy women that are acting crazy because they've all been through heck. It's not comfortable. You know, you may not like your dorm buddy. You may not like dinner. You may not like those stale donuts, and you may want to call somebody and say, get me out of here. You may want to call your abuser and say, just get me out of here. And they may hold your phone for, a few days just to see if you're beyond that vulnerability. And if you are, then you'll get your phone back. Now, phone calls that come in, they typically prefer you to have your phone calls come in through them. So they can screen, location and everything for safety for everybody else. Business phone calls that come in, or if you don't have a cell phone, whatever, the phone calls that come in, sometimes they're put in like a little cubby, like you have your own little place for your notes, like a little, like grade school. Sometimes they're just held at the reception. You have to ask for them, and they'll go through the whole pile and give them to you. It's different at each shelter. It's completely different, but your messages are not always private. Sometimes you may have to work the front desk, or another person may work the front desk. Other residents may be working reception, and they can get your information, your jobs, contact information that you're applying for, all kinds of stuff. They could screw up, something that you have really important coming down the line, So you always have to let somebody know, hey, yeah, this, I'm at a domestic violence shelter, and you may not get correct information, but go ahead and leave a message. And of course, if I don't respond to that message, I'll be in touch with you in a week anyway to make sure that, something didn't happen with you trying to contact me. And you'll definitely have to, follow up whether you got that phone call or not, because you may not get the message depending on, that social thing, whether or not the resident feels like giving it to you, if that's the case, or staff. Mail, same thing. People will steal your mail, and I think staff goes through your mail. Okay, I'm just going to be honest. If you've got something interesting where it looks like you've had a more privileged life than them, and oh my God, why is she getting a letter from this? Why does she have, oh, this looks like a cool thing? They will go through your mail. People are nosy, and they feel protected being there, so they feel like they're going to be okay to do that. Maybe they feel that they can lie to staff, whatever. If you can get your mail and your most important mail and most important phone calls through your mom or through somebody else outside of the domestic violence shelter, I definitely and highly recommend it, because you can't trust them at the domestic violence shelter doing it for you. Okay, so what number are we on now? Number 9, paying for your rent. I don't know if you knew this. Domestic violence shelters are federally funded. However, you will have to pay for your rent in a lot of them, especially depending on how long-term you need to be there and whether or not you're going to be staying in one of the apartments. So maybe in the dorm area, you won't be charged for rent, but once you move into the apartments, you're going to be charged for rent. You're going to be expected to get a job. You're going to be expected to show that you're applying for a job. You're going to be expected to pay for your rent. And your rent is just like, it may be on a sliding scale or whatever, but it's a certain amount. And I mean, it can be as expensive as an apartment, you guys. So, and you're still sharing it with somebody. You don't have all the privacy. I mean, but you have a security guard there. You've got staff there. You have protection at a domestic violence shelter. So, once you're able to pay for an apartment, I would recommend, and you feel that the court dates have passed or whatever you need to where you are in a safe time in your life, where the timing between you and the abuser is where you can move out on your own now. As soon as you can, do it, because domestic violence shelters, do play that game. They love to take your money, and you're still having to do all the chores, the mail thing. I mean, it's just not a piece of cake. If you can live on your own, do it. Absolutely, that would be the best way to go. And learn how to keep privacy. Get a P.O. box if you have to. Do something that can help you still keep your privacy if that's what you need to do once you move out. Okay, one last thing I'm going to add to that, because this is about rent and so on, is getting evicted. At any point in time, you can be asked to leave the domestic violence shelter. You can be asked to leave because of intake, because somebody else needs a bed more than you, and they're, are coming in the door right now. They'll send you out within a day or so. That quickly. You don't get a huge notice. You're asked to leave, and you have like a few days to get out. They don't always help you find another shelter either. So you're just on your own. One sense that you'll always have at a domestic violence shelter is that you really are on your own. You may get evicted because of grievances filed by staff or other residents against you. And if this happens, then they're definitely not going to want to spend the time to help you locate another shelter, locate anything, or even help you. They just want you out. They will kick you right out the front door on your day of expire, and they will not care 2 cents about you later on. Okay? They don't care as soon as you're out that door. They care about you when you are approved to be there and what they are mandatory to care about you for. Everything else, they don't care. What about your things that you leave behind after you're evicted? Whatever you leave behind is considered abandoned, and you have so many days to pick it up. Okay, so you can pick it up. Depending on the situation in which you leave, you may have to have somebody go pick it up for you that they approve of. Okay, because it's supposed to be a private place. It's just a really sticky situation being evicted or being asked to leave, but at any time it can happen to any resident there. You will find there are some residents that never get evicted and that stay there like for a year. You know what I'm saying? They're just there all the time. You may leave and come back to that domestic violence shelter, and you will find that there are some residents that have been there that whole time, never asked to leave. They don't do their work. You wonder why these people have such a free ride. But that's just the way it goes. There are some people that will get a free ride, and some of us that will have to, always be worried whether or not that they're going to have a bed tomorrow night or next week or next month. Is this going to be it? Which makes it really hard when you're going through PTSD, because you don't have stability to be able to function or heal when you've got right now. You've got today, tomorrow, the next 3 days maybe, and then that's it. Yeah, it can be really tough. Okay, so those are the top 10 things you didn't know about staying in a domestic violence shelter. Let me repeat them really quick. Facility and rooms, lack of privacy, required classes, activities and chores, the social game with other residents, medication, food access, resources and access to those resources, okay, to help you better your life. What was the next thing? The next thing, resource access, I think it was privacy, number 7. Yeah, more about your privacy was number 7. Number 8, power over your phone calls, your mail, and your personal contact coming into the shelter. Number 9, paying for your rent. And 10, getting evicted. Okay, that's the top 10 things about staying in a domestic violence shelter. Give this a thumbs up if you liked it. Also, you guys, there will be a link at the end of this video, either up here or the end of the video somewhere, on my personal experience staying in domestic violence shelters and what happened to me. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Blessed be.